Welcome to the Power Exit Podcast. This show is dedicated to business owners who want to scale up, plan smarter, and prepare for the ultimate exit. We'll talk with M&A experts and owners who've been through the process to provide actionable advice so that you can sell your business on your terms and without regret. I'm John Marsh. Join me as we prepare to take control of your exit. All right, Phil, thank you for being here as a guest on the Power Exit Podcast. I'm thrilled to have you. It's a unique situation here. I'm lucky that we get to talk to former clients about their experience. And I'm also lucky that some of those clients become friends, and I'm grateful for that and our relationship. So the goal of today is really just to tell your story. We want to hear about and kind of the impetus for the sale, why you decided to go to market, how that process was. A lot of business owners come to me and think, oh, I'm going to sell my business. It's going to be easy. And it's just not. And we had some unintended things that came up, a global pandemic in the middle of our transaction, which was obviously not ideal, but we got through it. So again, thank you for being here. I want to start with just tell us your story. I coach my clients that when we go to market, we talk about the three parts of the story. The business you founded, what problem you solved then, where the business is today or when you were going to market, and then what the growth story is for the business. And I feel like InfoTank had a compelling story on all three of those. So we'd love to hear from you on kind of the history of the business, what problem you solved, who you served, and why you decided to go to market.
Well, sure. Thank you. And thanks for having me. This is wonderful. Great to see you again. And, you got to get together more often.
I agree.
The company InfoTank, I started, and my wife, together we partnered, was back after I had been in the IT world, corporate for 15 years or so. Had moved here from the New York area in order to, expand my career with the company I was with. And then that company was moved to another company, and that was purchased, and they wanted me to move to Texas, and I had already put down roots, wasn't going to move the family again. So we took.
And you don't look good in a cowboy hat.
And I don't look good in a hat. I'm too short. And so we decided to take a severance package and see what we can do with it. And had a couple of months of runway to figure it out, and said, let's see what we can do on our own.
So what was that job? What were you doing there at that previous corporate?
I was the IT director of a software company here. In Atlanta. They got purchased by a Texas-based company, and that company's plan for integrating, they were big in M&A activities to grow their company.
Sure.
And their way of managing that was to basically combine the management staff. And so I don't know how they picked it, but I was one going to Texas, and there was others coming here, and we just decided that wasn't where we wanted life to go. So, we went out on our own, and blessed, lucky, I don't know, but my next door neighbor, who was a very good friend, was principal of a Christian school that had just started up here in the Atlanta area. I think they had 70 students and maybe a dozen teachers. And this was back in 98. So, schools were kind of behind the curve for IT. Most didn't have websites. Most didn't have email addresses. And so I just took a look at what they had going on, just to starting a new business here.
Yeah.
And their website had been put together by, I think, the headmaster's assistant and at a college project. It was terrible. And not that any websites were good in 1998, but I decided to just offer some free services and, in exchange for a referral. And that's what I did. Got to become friends with the business manager who had all these other plans, including a pile of computers sitting in his office. And I said, well, who's setting those up? And, he didn't have a plan. So I got my first contract.
That's awesome.
And, luckily it hit within that first couple of months. So it gave me the opportunity, and it just grew from there. We just grew a referral-based, business. I don't think we ever advertised, and went on for 22 years. We had a niche in the churches and the schools in the area because there's a lot of synergy there. Well, we had commercial businesses and all sorts of, all sorts, and just solved IT problems, both web stuff, programming, operational things, and, just
Well, that's
life.
That's interesting because, obviously there were on your customer list, there were a lot of churches and schools and large private schools and churches here in Metro Atlanta. But that wasn't by design, was it? You didn't set up InfoTank
unless there was some providence that pointed me toward that. No, I had no idea what I was going to do when we first decided to go out. It was like, I can do stuff with computers. Let's figure it out.
Yeah. Well, that's and so you started, in '98. Well, tell me about the name InfoTank.
It was funny because I was sitting at a company that I was with, knowing that this job was going away and I was going to need to move. And I was literally on GoDaddy looking for interesting names for a tech company. And that one popped up and I reserved it, and it became the name.
That's awesome. Well, I'll share, I was struggling with the name for my firm as well. And, I had a business coach tell me it needs to have your name in it. And I was against that, but I had a marketing firm helping and I didn't like any of the names there. So we drive over Marsh Creek on the way to school every day. And my 12-year-old, now 12, decided, Dad, that's the name. So that's how we came up with it. So sometimes it's out of our control and it works out. So that's great. So you grew the business, right? So in '98, you started, you and your wife, who was still involved at the time that you sold the business. But tell me about the journey from '98 to 2020 when you decided it was time to sell. Like, what did you do to build the business? What were the key employees and how did you scale it?
So, it all sort of, I'm a big relationship guy, which is probably why you and I work together. Yeah. And so really all the clients we brought on board and employees we brought on board were the result of some relationships. So, my first employee, a guy named Ray, who, was a musician at the time and was hired by a studio to redo a website. And so the studio hired me to come in and do some teaching and teach all these, it was like half a dozen folks on some of the technology involved and how to build it. And although he was a musician, he had some background in technology and he just took to programming. And with that first client, was a school. As they started growing, I realized we needed to do some education to the school, teach them how to use the technology we had. And he was a natural teacher, he was a guitar teacher, and he was good with the technology. So he had faith in me and I had faith in him, and I hired him as the first employee within, I think, 2 years.
Okay. And
then literally every employee after that was, somebody's wife came and handed me a resume and said, my husband's looking for a job. Or one of the other employees, I think we advertised once or twice for new employees, but beyond that, it was all referral, both in growing the business and growing the employees.
And how many employees did you have when you sold?
At the end, it was like 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good size.
And congratulations, because a lot of businesses don't survive at past year one. I don't know what the stats are off the top of my head, but they're staggering, right? So you've built something that scaled, was providing you with a good income, and it felt like you had it under control when we were working together. And that's one of the things we'll talk about later is the organization, but just diligently doing everything for the business, right? You had people there and you had a good work-life balance. How did you do that?
The company had grown to the point where, we sort of defined what services into two services. We delivered into two buckets. We had some operational stuff going on, and then we had the web and programming stuff going on. And so there were enough employees doing each of those tasks that I needed to get some kind of leadership, as it were. And so there was one guy, Ray, who was the first employee and still a good friend, who was responsible for taking care of all the development stuff. And then another gentleman who was responsible for taking care of all the operational stuff, which gave me a little bit of time, to have some, some family time.
Sure.
At that point, personally, I have two daughters. They were both married. My first grandson had just been born, so life was getting even more, busy on the personal side. So that investment in putting employees in place to take care of some parts of the business was paying back.
Yeah, that's great. So it's time to sell. Why? Because you've got this business that's cash flowing, that is serving its customers. What was the decision or inflection point for you to say, "Hey, I'm going to accept a call from this M&A advisor and hear him out"? Kind of walk us through that.
Well, it was interesting because the IT business is it has a lot of pressure. You're really never off, especially if you're the sole provider to an organization. You're going to get calls in the middle of the night. Churches are going to call you on a Sunday morning at 6 a.m. Schools are going to call you on a Monday, at 6, 7 a.m. because something's not working and the teachers just showed up and the students are going to walk in any minute now. And plus the environment. I mean, we made it through the Y2K issue. We made it through the, 2008 financial issue. We made it through the .com bubble crash, where we had like equipment issues and all sorts of things. So it's kind of a high pressure business in that sense. And, then COVID hit and we had schools that had never done online learning that within a week or two had to figure out how to do it.
Yep.
And we had churches that, never did online services that, needed to get all of their members to be able to, get on the web and see a service on some Sunday 2 weeks from now.
Right.
And we got through all that, and but it kind of wore me out.
Yeah, yeah.
and my wife saw it. There was a lot of stress, and we'd been doing this for 22 years at that point, and just lo and behold, some guy named John just contacts me out of the blue and said, "Hey, do you ever think about what your company might be worth?" And I said, let's figure it out.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was more just a evolution of where things should have gone.
Sure. Well, and timing matters a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most everything we do in life, timing is a big factor. So why Marsh Creek? Why hire a firm like mine or my firm specifically to help you navigate the process?
I mean, it again, relationships are sort of big with me. I could have taken that, that call and said, "Oh, I guess my company's worth something," and here's this guy who's going to give me, some kind of an assessment and an offer. Let me shop for 2 more. But honestly, it's the same way I pick my real estate agent. It's the same way I pick my insurance agent. If I hit it off with the person and they seem to be knowledgeable and fair and they're doing what needs to be done, I've got more faith in the person and than I do in that I'm going to get the best deal that there is to be gotten. Not that that's not important, but you can strike a better deal with a lesser institution or something, and then find that things fall apart.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that. It's important to find the right partner in life, obviously, and in business, your CPA, even your church, right? Finding your home. All right. So the first step was that valuation, showing, hey, what we think the business is worth. And that's an integral part because a lot of business owners think their business is worth a lot more than it is. But there's also a patient approach that we like to take, which is we're not going to give pricing guidance to the market. You're never going to get more than you ask for. And we're patient about finding the right, not only price, not only the right terms, but also the right partner for the legacy of your business. And we talk about the growth story, right? You were ready to move on to Life 2.0, but what was InfoTank's growth story from your perspective? That's an important part when we go to market of explaining to the market or buyers, what the growth trajectory is for the business. We always want to be honest and ethical and tell the truth. But what, from your point, was the growth trajectory of InfoTank for the next generation of owners?
I mean, doing the work we were doing was a constant upward path. We really didn't have any major dips because we were small enough to be able to kind of float the market, figure out where things are going. Technology's always changing, so you have to be aware of that. And then, we were strong as a company, had good employees, putting in place some good, processes. And so, there was no reason to believe that things weren't going to continue on that same path. And had I stuck with the business, we would probably have, doubled in size again by then. But it was the right time to sell, even though the business was profitable and doing well and had an upward trajectory at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
It probably helped the sales, as a matter of fact, quite a bit, I would think, to show that there was this consistent growth.
Yeah. And it was beautiful because there was a diverse customer base. There wasn't a significant concentration, but there were a couple big customers, but that diversification was important. and kudos to you for building a business that was attractive without you. That's one of the things we talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to check our ego at the door when we go into the process of selling our business. It's not all on the backs of the owner or the founder. I like it when my clients are on the golf course 3 days a week. It doesn't happen a lot, but if the business is running without you as the cog in the wheel or making all the decisions. So tell me a little bit about how you empowered your employees. It seemed obviously you had some tenured folks like Ray you've mentioned who you trusted, but you had folks on the ground at facilities, full-time or part-time.
Yeah.
Tell me about that and the impact that the legacy and the people that you had built the business with. What were your concerns there or goals in helping them, be comfortable with the transition?
Well, I mean, we all had our own clients in a sense, so whether it was an employee who was on site at a particular client who felt like they were one of the employees there, or whether it was somebody who just sort of oversaw the supervision of those kinds of things and showed up once a week just to say, hey, is everything going okay? We had a real relationship with the clients. And so in terms of comfort for the employees, I mean, not that they didn't care about me, but I think they did, but it didn't really affect their jobs specifically because that next Monday they were going to go back to the same thing they were doing at the client that they were happy doing it for, and things just sort of had some continuity to them in that sense.
Right.
So in that way, it kept things rolling, and didn't really. I think there was less concern for the new owners because of that, and there was certainly some comfort level for the employees.
Yeah. And tell me about the transition period. We'll go back to the process of marketing,
Sure.
but how long were you involved post-closing? What did that transition look like? Was it a heavy lift for you? And how much time did you give
honestly,
buyers?
in this particular case, it was less than I thought. I mean, we had some contractual obligations to be involved for a certain amount of time, but I think the new owners kind of knew where they wanted to go. And in fact, they wound up taking the business in a slightly different direction, and they've been successful, which is fantastic. But it just really meant some handful of brain dumps between myself and, there were two buyers, the owners partnering, brothers, and they each had their separate piece. So I was, helping one figure out the business side of things and the other one figure out the technology side of things. And literally it was a handful of meetings and an occasional phone call or two, and things actually went pretty smoothly.
And that's ideal. It's important that we give the buyer enough runway to transition all of the knowledge. And ideally, we're going to give them some consulting services over a period of time, obviously for compensation for pay. But so let's go back to the process, right? This was the first time you had sold a business, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what do you think you did well? And we're going to ask, what you didn't do well or what we could have done better, because that's in everything you do. But tell me about the things that went really well and positioned InfoTank to be a successful acquisition.
Well, I mean, I think not to, to your own horn or anything, but I think we were a good business, and it was well managed, and we had good players in place and good clients and relationships that went back decades, and so the stability of that, I think, sort of was helped quite a bit, and then just the fact that we kind of knew the numbers, we knew what was going on. We knew, although I didn't know the value of the company, I did know, what the company makeup was. And it was not hard to answer questions about, what do we project this to be, or what contracts do we have here, or what are our costs with that, or that type of thing. It just adds to the stability of the whole situation.
Yeah. And it's surprising to me sometimes when we get into the process with certain clients, how they don't understand their business. They're not doing a variance analysis or a budget. You were extremely diligent about your budgeting. Talk through that process, because candidly, that's not something a lot of business owners at this size do very well, is the budgeting. So you've inspired my wife and I to do some personal budgeting through the software you recommend. But so tell me a little bit about the organization, and I want you to go into that with the due diligence process too, because the due diligence process is intense. It's, a 60, 90, maybe even 120-day period where they're asking everything.
Mm-hmm.
So you handled that really well
Well,
because you knew the business and you were very responsive. We say time kills deals. So tell us a little bit about that due diligence process, and was that what you expected? Was it more intense? Just kind of walk us through that.
Well, I mean, in terms of just like running the company, I think a lot of businesses, and especially in the first couple of years, they're concerned about making money. They're concerned about getting clients. They're concerned about, the little battles, the short-term ones. After a while, once things are going, or maybe if you've had other businesses prior or worked in larger organizations, you realize that this is just a machine, and you're feeding it employees, and you're feeding it money, and you're feeding it time, and you're getting out services or products or whatever you do for your clients. And the thing becomes just this operational machine after a while. And just like you're driving down the road and looking at your gas gauge and know how much further you can get on that trip to Florida, if you're not keeping track of your numbers and you don't know what your expectations are, you're looking to have a breakdown on the side of the road. And especially, like I said, the IT business is pretty, a lot of pressure in some ways, and you got to overcome a lot of like obstacles that the environment throws at you. And the only way to really do that is to understand, how big a hill can we climb, and how long can we keep climbing this hill before there's an issue, and can we do this on cash, or do we have to do it on credit? All those kinds of decisions. After a while, you just know, and so I think time more than anything gave me that knowledge. And then in the due diligence process, it was just an output of all that, right? So as you came up with questions about, what this report or what are these expectations, it wasn't that hard to pull those numbers together. I had to ask you what a pro forma was because I didn't even know what that was. Once you told me what it was and we needed to put those numbers together, I think I probably had it in a day or so.
You did, yes. And that's music to my ears. In fact, if you want to come consult with Marsh Creek to help our other clients respond quickly, you would be happy to do that. Could you have done this yourself? Could you have sold your business without an advisor?
Probably not. In fact, I thought about, you're always thinking about what are you going to do someday, like when you want to step away from this thing. And I turned to the employees and said, anybody interested in picking this up, and we can have a long runway for it, but you're going to have to do what I do and not what you're currently doing over time. And none of them were interested. I think it's a personality thing too. Right. Not everybody is going to sort of own or run a business. And honestly, I didn't even think in terms of what the business was worth. My financial guy always said, your business is worth something like this, and you should consider that an asset as you're doing your planning for your just life finances. I never even thought about it in those terms. In my mind, I'd be willing to just walk away from it if needed, at some point in life, and just let it pare down naturally as clients exit or whatever.
That makes me cringe when I hear folks like you say that.
I know, because you know better than me. Yeah. I didn't know well. I mean, honestly, just, working with you and the discussions we had and going through the process of the evaluation and all that was like, okay, my financial guy has been right all this time. And this isn't something I should be just leaving on the table. And wrapping your head around the idea of a sale was really where it came to me. I wouldn't have thought to do it myself otherwise.
Yeah. Well, we talk about the power exit and taking control of the process. Let's talk a little bit about the competitive energy we saw. We had several offers. We had a ton of interest. Kudos to the business you built. Obviously the IT space was, and still is, desirable. But tell me a little bit, were you surprised by the level of interest we got, the offers we got?
I was, because, obviously, if you weren't expecting to sell, then when people are interested in buying it, all of a sudden it's like, okay, this might be a real thing. And I think I was impressed by the diversity. I mean, we had a lot of different folks, and you and I got on the phone quite a bit to just answer questions and conduct interviews of potential buyers and that kind of thing, and have them ask the questions. And they had different goals in mind, and it was surprising to me how many niches the business might fit into. And
and that's where the options come in, right? We want that's the fun part of this, where you've got a lot of suitors, a lot of folks interested in your business, but 50% of deals fall through post LOI. So we've got to gauge not only the price and terms, but the financial capacity of that buyer. Can they close the transaction? Tell me a little bit about, without naming names, who the buyer was, what their profile was, and why you were interested in selling to them versus some of the other
Sure.
Interested parties we had.
I mean, well, these were two brothers, I think, ex-military guys who were, had other careers going on, but decided they wanted to sort of partner up and buy a business. And they had done their research and they knew what, they were good business people. They understood that part of it. And, it was going to be a partnership between them, which I honestly liked because this business had been a partnership between my wife and I, and the employees we had were family at that point. And they had that same sort of vibe. I think it was kind of going to be a family thing for them. And they liked the idea that we were sort of a family business. And sort of wanted to take over that. In that sense, then it's not just selling to some cold purchaser who has a pocket full of cash and wants your business. It's somebody you feel like, wants to continue the tradition kind of thing.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's an important part of what we do, right? And behind the scenes, we're qualifying or pre-screening those buyers, asking for approval letters, proof of funds, things like that.
Sure.
So it's important, and I'm glad it worked. It was a smooth transaction.
It was pretty smooth.
In the middle of COVID, sitting around your table at your house, 6 feet apart from each other. I don't think we wore masks. Don't tell Fauci. But point there is that I was surprised. There was a lot of uncertainty throughout the world at that point, and in a variety of industries. Why do you think your business sold during that time and was set up to sell versus others who were significantly struggling during that time?
I mean, honestly, well, like you said, it's a desirable business. IT, was and continues to be. But it was also a time for change. Whenever there's change comes opportunity, right? That's the saying. And so on my side of things, there was a little bit of buffer because of some money that was available through the COVID process when they were telling people they had to stay home. The government compensated a little bit for that. So we had some loans that helped float things long enough while some of these clients, were having trouble themselves. And then on the other side of the thing, I think the buyers, I think they got some pretty good deals because of SBA, loans and things like that were being offered. So I think the environment just almost because of and in spite of COVID, allowed for some activity to seem normal, like the sale of a business, while everything else was going crazy.
Yeah. So I didn't go back to it, but I'm going to. What could we have done better? What is the thing or the things about the transaction where it's like, is there something you, looking back on, think you would have done differently during this process?
Well, I mean, I probably, this would be advised to any business seller. I think if I had done anything different, it would have been to be more prepared ahead of time for the idea of selling a business, because I didn't really think about it until we began our conversations. And so things like our corporate structure really was not a good deal for me in the end, in terms of taxes and that kind of thing. The environment itself was allowing for the sale, but my ability to wrap my head around what I needed to do to prepare for such a thing, I didn't have any preparation. I didn't expect it. In terms of what we could have done better, I think everything went as smooth as could be. I did track down my own lawyer. I did track down a good accounting firm and got all those pieces in place. And luckily, I was able to find those partners at the same time because, they invaluable for being able to structure the deal. I think, if I had thought about that kind of stuff ahead of time, we're not trying to, hustle to get reports to you guys and to figure out what to do. In the meantime, I don't have an accounting firm. My accountant flat out said, I don't do this kind of M&A stuff. So I'd find a new one. And, I never had a lawyer that structured these kinds of contracts or, review that. So those kinds of things probably become better.
We joking, although it may not be a joke, we say lawyers and landlords kill deals.
Oh, yeah.
And when you came to me with your own attorney, there was some, a little bit of angst on my side, but he ended up being a pro. And somebody I refer to now who's in my network.
Oh,
so
good.
that was a good thing. Oftentimes, a client has a relationship with an attorney who's maybe done their wills, their estates, helped them with, employment matters, and they're really not suited to do an M&A transaction. Luckily, you did your diligence in finding someone who was specific to business sales and knows how to get deals done. So Rob did a great job. And
I mean, that was also, again, back to relationships. He was recommended to be by my financial guy who I had known for years and years and years and years. And, Rob and I had shared some of the same interests and actually had some common friends. Those kinds of things just come together. And when they sort of naturally seem to come together, I just stand back and let them come together.
Yeah. Well, so you were one of the few as well who really had a good vision for what was next for you. So I'd love for the listener to hear about what was next for you, and how you were able to emotionally separate from the business after that transition. It's something you built 22 years, right? And it was your blood, sweat, and tears over that time.
Yeah.
Was that a hard thing for you to say, hey, I'm going to give this to the next generation?
I mean, after 22 years, you expect something to, to happen. You need an exit plan of some kind. And if you don't come up with an exit plan is going to happen to you at some point in your life. So I was thinking about those kinds of things and thinking about what kinds of things to do next. And probably for a couple of years, I was thinking about those kinds of things and, just exploring other options, just interests, things like that. In the end, what pushed me over the edge was walking my grandson around the neighborhood thinking I'd rather be doing this than sweating through these COVID business decisions. And that made the final decision. But I had already, been thinking about, what to do next. And I had been doing some financial coaching. I thought I would spin that up and, that would be a nice little retirement thing to do. I've since started a woodworking business and I'd, take some old hobbies and interests and do something with them. And, that's sort of paved the way.
You're one of my favorite Instagram follows, although you haven't been posting as much.
No, I need to some more.
All right. So what's your Instagram handle?
Well, it's just Phil Cannizzaro.
Yeah, let's check it out. Woodworking. So that's one of your hobbies, right? Running, travel. Have you felt like you've been able to do more of those things post acquisition?
I mean, to the extent that running a daycare center for our grandkids has allowed us some time. Yeah, I guess so. But we are doing more. My wife and I are traveling more, and we're getting living life while we still have some life to live.
There you go. Well, you got plenty of it. Yeah. So I still have the bat box you built me.
Oh, cool.
We've got the creek behind us.
Yeah. Any bats moved in?
Well, I don't know if I installed it the right way, but
I'll come help you out.
I think so. So Phil, I started the business in January of 2020.
Okay.
You were one of the first folks who I contacted in my first sale. I remember being with Megan, my wife, and saying, "Oh, I think I got a good one here. We're getting along really well, and I think he's ready to hire us." And the next day, I get a phone call from you saying, "John, how long have you been doing this?" So, unbeknownst to me, you had found my Facebook profile where I had announced the new firm. And tell me about that. It gave me a good scare, but tell me about that.
Well, it wasn't meant to scare you, but as I say, through my entire life, through business, through growing the company, all that, relationships have been sort of the important thing, and honesty and being able to work together has been important to me in all business aspects. And so when you had contacted me and, we got to talking about it and you'd, given an evaluation for the company and it seemed like this was something that could happen. And you're right. I always do my homework and I began to realize this guy's kind of new at this. And I don't know what experience he has. And so I just outright asked, is this going to be your first sale? And you were honest and you said, yeah, it is. But I'm going to do the right job. And to me, had you tried to BS me at that point, we might have walked away. Yeah. But at that point, it was like, okay, I can work for this guy.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I told you about my 10 years as a CFO and transactions there.
I knew you had the experience.
but it's funny because I thought, wow, this is the way business goes, right? And here we are sitting almost 5 years later.
Yeah.
Good friends, which I appreciate very much. And I think we had a good result. I think it was, I know we had a good result. We built the demand, and I'm thrilled that you were able to exit on your terms and without regrets.
Mm-hmm.
Phil, thank you for being here. Before we go, I'd love to hear a little bit about advice that you have for other folks who've built these businesses and want to exit. What would you leave them with as they consider their options in taking their business to market?
I mean, probably the biggest lesson I learned is think about this kind of thing early. Have an exit plan of some kind, even if it's just in your head. And then get some advice from, your attorney, your accountant, whomever, to make sure that the business is sort of positioned well, and just believe that it can be done, and put in place a couple things that might help that process along.
Yeah. We talk about every 90 days, you need to be thinking about growth or exiting the business. Mm-hmm. Every 90 days. Even if you're 2 years in, who's on your team? Mm-hmm. Are your corporate governance documents in order? Are you building your financials in a way that is consistent, sustainable, and accurate? So you need to be thinking about these things well in advance of an exit. The other thing I would encourage owners to do is engage someone like me. It's free. But to have a valuation done on your business. Understand what your options are, what those growth levers are, because oftentimes you're not ready to sell and the number isn't what you want it to be, but it's a realistic number, and let's talk about what you need to get to the next stage so that you are ready when the time comes. Phil, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for your friendship, and I'm really glad to have you on the podcast today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I enjoy our friendship, and this has been a wonderful process all along.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to the Power Exit Podcast. Please subscribe on all the socials, and we hope to see you next time.